Welcome back to Unsolicited, where we give you the unsolicited insights on everything you didn't know you needed to know about government contracting, working with industries, serving the mission, and building better partnerships across government and tech. Don't forget, by the way, to subscribe and turn on notifications. That way you don't miss any of these unsolicited insights. Today, our guest is one of the most unconventional yet operationally relevant backgrounds that we have had the pleasure of featuring on this show. And so this is Shawn Cressman. And Shawn grew up in rural Pennsylvania, where he ran his family's landscape and tree care business for a decade. He handled everything from operations and sales to payroll and early software development. After selling his business and moving to San Antonio, he stepped into the world of cyber and information security, eventually operating the front and back ends of 2 Air Force cyber defense weapon systems, and later working in DevSecOps, the environment, for electronic and spectrum warfare missions. Today, he is a capture manager for Semper Valens, bringing together some rare real-world business experience, lived mission experience, and a grounded relationship-driven approach to sales. Shawn, welcome to Unsolicited.
Thank you very much, Hope.
Yeah, we're super glad to have you. We were talking before the show today, and I was telling you that I really want you to share with me all of the expertise that I know your varied background brings to this industry. So I want to start by talking about your path. And so your path into the cyber and federal workspace started away from the defense world, as we just learned,
Yes.
Running your family's landscape and tree care business. So talk to me about how the different path that you took to get here, that mix of experiences, shape the way that you approach things in the federal space, and how you support government customers today because of that.
Okay. Well, I'll try to keep the answer somewhat in a short timeline here. But going all the way back to childhood was being raised by my parents, who owned that company since before I was born. I wasn't one of those kids where dad just said, "Hey, here's the keys to the kingdom. You're the boss now." I literally started at the bottom, raking leaves and pushing wheelbarrows of dirt from when I was 14 on working over the summers, and working with a lot of older blue collar guys. They knew I was the boss's son, but I definitely had to earn the respect. So being able to show people that you're working with and may eventually supervise one day, they want to know that you're technically competent and that you're going to treat them with respect, and that you've done what you're asking them to do at some point in the past. So, I learned that as a young teenager, carried that all the way through running that company. And yes, there were days I'd run payroll, and then I'd jump in the truck and go out and help a crew if I had to, if they were short, or, somebody underbid a job and we had to get it done by the end of the day. Yeah. It's got to get done, stay on schedule. So, just quick changing hats like that, and going from that industry into cyber, I figured it's probably the same thing. There's a lot more intelligent people that want to know that you're competent, and I don't want to get into go pitch a customer and get called on the carpet for not knowing something. Yeah. So taking several years and working on the ops floor, in the maintenance shop, slinging code or whatever, being able to do that and say I do that and understand it. And I would never say I'm proficient or a master of any of it, but I understand it well enough to talk intelligently about it and understand the concepts and how the Air Force does cyber and how the Air Force does software. Yeah. And then able to translate that into once I've come full circle to a business role.
No, I think it's great, and it makes a lot of sense that. So I've had leaders that have told me how to do a thing that they've never done, and it's very hard to digest.
It is.
Because you're like, you're trying to tell me that to do something that you've never done and don't know could actually be done. And so I love that you come with this lens that says, hey, I've worked front shop, back shop. I understand how the cookies are made. And so you can convey that to a customer that wants to know, can you really speak to the requirement?
Right.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. So when you think about the government requirement owners, right? So the requirement owners, they're going to their contracting officer. They said, this is the thing that I need. When they're talking about challenges that they face, and you have aspects of your operational past that says, hey, I've sat at that desk and had to deal with, I think you said ones and zeros or the code, I think. You are able to spot issues or maybe even misunderstandings that a contracting officer might be trying to look for if that doesn't meet the operational need that the requirements owner said, hey, this is what I'm trying to get from industry. Speak to that a little bit.
So I understand, the contracting officer also has to look at cost. And sometimes your requirement owners, whether they truly need that requirement or they went to a conference and somebody said, you need this. Yeah. This is the latest great thing since sliced bread. And they may not fully understand that while it meets the requirement, the cost is just astronomical or unsustainable. So, being able to meet with a contracting officer and trying to find that balance between functionality and cost, and then not disappointing your requirement owner when they ask for something and you give them a 75% solution and say, sorry, that's all we can afford. Do your best. Yeah.
Especially if you can get closer to the 100% solution, but maybe without the bells and whistles.
Right. And understanding what those bells and whistles are. And then, sometimes it's personality dependent, where I'm sure you've met people who love bells and whistles. And if it doesn't have bells and whistles, they don't want it. Even if they're not going to use them.
The shiny new toy.
Some people love shiny new toys, and having a shiny new toy person as a requirements owner, that can get a little bit more tricky than someone who's more frugal, more just give me the bare tools and I'll get it done. I'll figure out a way.
Wow. I mean, and so I think that might be kind of difficult on both sides. The requirements owner says, hey, I need a thing, but the contracting officer, maybe after speaking with industry, says, there's a need and there's a want. And I can get you closer to all of your needs if we can stave off some of the wants. And you're able to help with that. Maybe help a requirements owner understand what they actually need, or maybe help a contracting officer convey that message appropriately.
Yes, or if a contracting officer pushes back and says, well, I don't think you actually need that. Sometimes hearing it from a third party who says, well, I've worked with a tool that does that, or I've worked with the legacy tool, and a new tool with some bells and whistles really is necessary. Let's find a way to make it work.
No, that's brilliant. I had the opportunity when I served in the Air Force to be the SME that was working with the contracting office as we were going through different industry vendors to try to determine who would best meet the need. And it wasn't until then that I realized contracting officers are trying their darndest to figure out how to get what the requirement owner wants without fully understanding themselves the need of that mission, because they don't do it.
Right.
So you don't just come in and say, hey, I'm industry, hear me roar. You're coming in and saying, hey, look, let me help. Let me help you understand what they need and how we can get you what they need.
Yes.
I think that's great.
Very valuable, because I've been that customer when I was active duty cyber, and I'm trying to convey to the my supervisors that are communicating with the contracting squadron what we need. Like, this is what we need, and I may not be able to say it the way the contracting officer understands it, but having someone on the industry side that sat in that same seat that I sat in, that's invaluable. That is very, very invaluable to help us get what we need.
Yeah. It's true. And so you living or having lived on the operational side gives you that experience. But I think you also come armed with, how does the person in the quote unquote foxhole or trench feel about what they're getting after the requirements owner says, here's what I want, and the contracting officer said, here's what I can get you. The service recipient is the one that's sitting in the seat going, man, what are they bringing? But you had the opportunity to sit in that seat. And so you hopefully can bring a better, maybe third alternative that's a win-win, if I were speaking as Franklin Covey here.
Yeah. And having that technical background, I think it lends some credibility, both to the requirements folks, the end users, and the contracting folks.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned early on when you were speaking about your dad not giving you the keys to the kingdom and telling you to go to the front of the line. He was like, you're going to build calluses on them hands and get your knees dirty because you got to start at the very bottom of this. And I think in my world, there are two kinds of parent coaches. There's the parent coach that says, I'm in charge, I'm going to put my kid in every round. And there's the parent coach that's like, no, you're going to come up the hard way like everybody else. And it sounds like your dad wanted you to have not just institutional knowledge, but the institutional competency.
He did. I think that's partly how he was brought up, but just he understands working with the kind of people that work in the landscape industry. Respect is earned, and he would have done me a disservice both at that age and later in life if things were just handed to me.
Yeah.
And in fact, he may have gone pretty far in the opposite direction, gave me some of the worst jobs. I can give you one specific example. We had this customer named Mr. Bickford, very, very wealthy, multiple acre estate, and he had this holly hedge. I don't know if you ever touched hollies.
Pokey.
They're pokey. Well, the holly hedge was about as wide as this cubicle
That
here,
doesn't sound
about
fun
12
at
foot
all.
wide. It was about 60 feet by 60 feet by 60 feet. It was like a big U-shaped holly hedge, and every summer, all the dead leaves had to be pulled out. And this thing was about 16 feet tall. So I spent almost a week there by myself, crawling under here and pulling leaves out. And there's no amount of clothing that will keep you from getting poked. And, I looked like I had the measles at the end of every day, just all these pokes and blood marks and everything. And that went on for a week.
But in my mind, I'm picturing now this experience that gives you empathy for everyone else that has to do that job.
Absolutely.
And I think that speaks to your having occupied the desk in an operational Air Force unit that now you are working hard to provide experts to do those jobs because you now know what those hot spots are.
Yeah. And while my time on keyboard, I'll say, for the Air Force was shorter than I spent in the trenches in the landscape industry. We had a server or a hardware appliance go down in Hawaii, and I had to grab something out of the warehouse, ship it out, and suffer in Hawaii.
This would make you a multi-capable airman, as we would refer to you, as you have a primary role, but then you're able to fill in where we need you on a couple of extra things.
Right.
But I'm not sure I feel sorry for you suffering in Hawaii.
Yeah,
or when there's an
man.
outage and Air Force email is at stake, and you don't go home until it's fixed, however many hours or days or shifts it takes.
That's right.
So Hawaii is a fun example.
Yeah, but only someone who has, sat side by side with our uniformed personnel, experiencing those roles, doing those tasks, would understand the kind of folks that you need to put in those seats, but also the kind of answers you need to bring to that contracting officer about what is in the art of possible, one, and two, what is the best solution.
Yes. Yep.
I love it. I think it's great. And so requirement owners, I just want you to expand on this for me a little bit. Requirement owners often say that industry misses the mark because they don't fully understand what things look like on the ground. In your experience, what helps industry keep conversations realistic then, and then focused on what the end user can actually use? How do you help keep them focused on what the problem is they're trying to solve as you work them through those things?
So there is the added complexity on the industry side of the profit motive, and nobody wants to lose money. Occasionally, if you really need to deliver, maybe you can just break even. It's not ideal, but you do have to stay in business and be able to pay people a living wage, cover your costs and whatnot. So you started out asking if industry can miss the mark by not understanding what's required. I would throw that back on the government and say, help us understand by just posting a PWS to sam.gov and saying, this will help you understand. Having been on a contract and reading the PWS, be like, we don't do that at all. Mm-hmm. Or it says you use these tools, but this PWS was from 2 solicitations ago. We haven't used that tool in the last 6 years, but yet it's still in there. And, that's sometimes it's just reading that is not indicative of what is actually taking place on the ground. So, while I love going to conferences and industry days and having a senior leader talk about what they need and what's required, sometimes I'd rather talk to an engineer. I don't want to sit through your briefing. Let me go down the hall and go talk to the maintenance shop. Let me go talk to your coders, and I want to see what you're actually using.
Well, and I love that you say that because, and at the risk of sounding pejorative, like I found that in the military, oftentimes the procurement cycles for like products instead of services were so slow that by the time you got something, it was already outdated, right? And so it sounds to me like some of these requirements owners are coming with, hey, here's what we need, when they don't really need that anymore. They needed that 2 iterations ago. Let me share with you what has changed since then. Yeah. Is what you're saying.
Or you're in a situation where they have legacy things that still need sustainment, but they also have requirements for new tools, and you need to do both.
Yeah, it's like the mullet dress, right? Like short in the front, long in the back. You need both things.
I haven't seen one. Tell me you don't own one.
No, cool. No.
Okay, good.
No, but I'm just saying, so like you still need to serve some of the old requirement while you're trying to hopefully move them into the new age with like updating some of those things that maybe they aren't taking into account because they're still working from those old systems, requirements, things.
Right. And sometimes there's downstream and upstream effects and dependencies where, I can give a somewhat hypothetical example. We're working on some legacy software or hardware, and we're working to transition to the new thing that another organization or another department is building, and all of a sudden they hit a snag and say, well, it's going to be another year. Well, now we have to switch from our roadmap to, implementing the new thing to let's just fall back to sustaining the legacy thing, and all the improvements and modernization, we'll just put that on hold because it's the dependencies elsewhere and they're not ready.
That's right. You got to keep that limping thing moving.
Yes, and nobody wants to, but you don't have another choice.
Yeah, no,
we have no influence on the new thing coming down the line.
No, it's fair. I understand that kind of have to, even if you don't want to, because you've got to work with where you are, not where you wish you were.
Right. And it's hard for even a requirements owner or an operational unit to anticipate delays outside of their control. When we bring in solutions architects and some big brain people to solve a problem, we solve the problem, and then they say, well, can't do it yet. That's frustrating for everybody.
For sure.
Everybody, especially the warfighter who was hoping to get a new tool.
I just need help
or a new
here.
Capability. Yeah.
The number of times I was on a military installation and a road would be closed what seemed like in perpetuity because they had this amount of money for demolition, this amount of money for construction. They get in there and find that there's something amiss. And now it's going to cause all kinds of other problems that they have to deal with managing the problem before they can move on to the right solution.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, ooh, that's messy.
I've been there too, and that forces us to just be the squeaky wheel, right? When your leadership is like, well, why didn't this get done? I'm like, well, sir, man, we don't have that capability because you said we didn't have the money for it. So what do you want us to do?
Yeah. It's a juggling act, a balancing act.
Yeah. But I love that we're seeing ourselves in industry as advocates and educators as much as we're seeing ourselves of service providers or product providers. We're like, hey, look, maybe we have another alternative that's more helpful.
Yes, I think that's helpful in you just by you guys doing this podcast is hopefully somebody in any of those fields tunes in and says, maybe industry's not so bad after all. Maybe they're not just purely profit driven and they actually want to help. Yeah. And likewise, from industry, I'm sure you bring on contracting officers and folks who are really trying to do the right thing and don't just want the lowest price. They want the best solution. So just really opening up the conversation and being transparent, I think has slowly shifted culture.
I think it's great because I think that there needs to be more conversation. I realize that oftentimes when you're stretched so thin, like, you might be in a one deep shop doing something from a contracting officer perspective,
Yeah.
or you might be in a unit that doesn't have a contracting officer. So you're having to go to someone else's contracting officer and say, hey, will you help me source this need? And so you kind of feel like, I don't want to like go find additional answers because I'll never get it done. It's like,
Right.
let me just work with what I've got right now. And maybe that's not the best, but that's where industry days or other things where you're like, hey, industry, bring me some solutions
Yeah.
that I can actually go to maybe a contracting officer with later that says, this is the best that I know to ask for right now.
Yeah, and I do empathize too with contracting officers and the requirements folks, where there's 20 companies each trying to sell them something that are sometimes overlapping, sometimes almost identical, and that's a position I've never been in, having to pick between 20 great solutions.
Sure. Or what looks like 20 great solutions. Because I want you to talk to me about that real quick. So
Open that
some
can
of
of
our
worms.
industry teammates maybe have these practices of overpromising. So how can we avoid overpromising and then just help ensure that proposals are staying aligned with the actual operational requirements? Like if you were to give advice to some of our industry partners, because you said we've got bills to pay, we've got people to pay, we've got
Sure.
a business to run. And so sometimes we feel compelled to overpromise and then we maybe take a lowest price technically acceptable and then can't accomplish or whatever. Like how do we keep from overpromising?
So I think one of the ways that I've found, again, I've only been in the role a little over 3 years. So maybe this has been going on for longer than I know, but just in our Semper Valens portfolio and the things we've bid on, we've seen an uptick in the orals requirements where the government doesn't want us just to turn in a beautifully written proposal. They want, no kidding, SMEs and experts to come in and talk about it. And they're going to ask you questions in real time. And you can't really chat GPT your way out of a live conversation. When you're all in a room together, maybe you can dip out for 20, 30 minutes and formulate your responses, phone a friend type of thing. But I think it's a lot easier to out the frauds. Or sift out the less acceptable solutions.
No, I think that's good. I love the idea of being able to bring an expert to talk about the expertise that the customer is looking for. Because it could be dangerous if I just go sit in there and then they ask me something and I'm like, hey, I can sell ice to an Eskimo. I'll walk you through anything you want to know. And the person on the other side may not know that they're getting, a bunch of gobbledygook.
Right.
But like you said, if you give them an opportunity, take a break, go find a good answer, maybe a potential solution, walk back in and then deliver that like it made sense. Because sometimes I get afraid of people that are too quick to answer. Like,
Yeah.
You didn't even let me finish the question.
Yeah. And hopefully the government will have people in there that can sniff out BS in the, not just a selection board, but watching the orals, listening to the orals, or forming questions.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the organizations that you're either a part of or that you support, because I read some of the stuff that you sent back and I thought it was really great, actually. So you've been involved in organizations like AFCEA. And AFCEA, it helps bring together government operators and then industry. But
Sure.
they do it in a neutral setting. And from your perspective, what do groups like AFCEA enable the traditional sales environment to do that maybe that old traditional system can't do?
Yeah. So one thing that professional associations like AFCEA and AUSA do is sometimes, and I don't want to say this in a bad way, but they do things sometimes that industry can't, simply because of the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, or the DFAR. There are things that industry is not permitted to do and government is not permitted to do, and we need to avoid those conflicts of interest, which ultimately just delay deliverables to the warfighter. And they're in place for good reason. But when you can have a disinterested third party, which also happens to be a nonprofit, host a conference, host a happy hour, host a lunch and learn, or a briefing by a government official or senior leader, it kind of adds a buffer in between government and industry to allow things to take place that companies can't really do themselves.
I think it's brilliant, because the problem is oftentimes the requirements owner / the contracting officer is trying to buy a thing. We've had this whole discussion. They don't even know that maybe something new is out, something better is out, or what could better suit the need that they're trying to solve. And industry often can't get through the door because sometimes anyone government thinks it's illegal to talk to anyone industry, when in reality, the FAR actually says that government should talk to industry early and often about your requirements. So that we can help you solve the problem.
Right. And time is a limited resource, and sometimes it's easier for a government person to walk an exhibit floor and see 30 vendors in one day than try to see 30 vendors in their office. True. Which could take a week or more. So, and AFCEA and AUSA are great organizations to do that. Of course, they're typically run by volunteers, so it requires folks to spend extra hours away from family and home to execute and plan and execute those events. But ultimately, I think it's worth it for everyone.
I think so too. I think that our Alamo chapter of AFCEA does that in our military city USA here, giving us the opportunity to interact with government. But I think it's important that we talk about not just how that allows us to connect with industry, but I want to talk a little bit about how organizations like AFCEA, but there's others, I'm going to talk about this one, allow us to help the government in a totally different way. So I read that you mentor young cyber students through programs like Cyber Patriot. There it is. Why is early mentorship such an important part of building future technical and operational workforces that the government agencies will come to depend on?
So when you look at industries like cyber and IT and software development, it's not something you can train somebody in a week. You can't go to tech school for 3 months and come out an expert and be able to run a world-class weapon system. That training takes a long time. And unfortunately, we're competing against international adversaries and nation states that we do not want to fall behind. So we don't have the luxury of a decade to train someone out of college to do offensive cyber, defensive cyber, or integrate AI. We need that pipeline tomorrow. So trying to just shift left on education for that, it's the IT industry. I'll just use that as an umbrella term. I'll say it's portable. You can introduce that to young kids in elementary school, middle school, high school, and the Air Force Association and their Cyber Patriot program has been an amazing example of that. It's countrywide. They have introduced it all the way down to middle school, where they have an annual competition for network defense and hardening, Windows systems, Linux systems, routers, and that they can teach kids the basics at a young age. There's a curriculum that they provide that teachers can run the kids through. There's labs, virtual labs for them to learn. And, you can have kids coming right out of high school at 18, landing phenomenally paying jobs in the tech industry. And I love college, but there are some people that I'll hire them tomorrow, give them a clearance and stick them on a contract because I need them doing valuable work. And
I'm smiling.
They know how to do it, and they're good at it.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I had a young airman that worked under my charge in the military that got out and is now making a phenomenal amount of money doing some incredible things that he tells me he is so excited about. Like, and I love that you're talking about really young kids, because it's just like the old science fairs or the Roblox or any of those other things where you get kids invested when they're young.
Yeah.
They can find it fun, they can find it interesting, and it can actually turn into a career.
Yeah. And we almost have to do it because our adversaries are doing it.
That's right.
And we can very quickly fall behind.
Yeah. And, you know, it's like the old adage, don't bring a knife to a gunfight, right? And so when you're trying to take up cyber training to these folks that are going into college, you're already late. You're way late.
You are. And desperate is not the right word. I'll say creative. The city, especially in Cyber City, USA, we have programs for like workforce retraining to take people out of lower paid hourly jobs where their skills and talents are just underutilized, and run them through some cyber classes and training and boot camps and workshops and get them into the job field. So
I love it. I love it. So for our industry teammates, because I want to make sure that other folks that are in the GovCon industry know that if they wanted to participate in something like this, because maybe they haven't yet learned the value of mentoring young people in whatever their industry is, because I'm sure that cyber isn't the only one that has these mentorship options, right?
Right.
Where do they go? Maybe what may be a jumping off point? How did you learn about Cyber Patriot? Where do they go to learn how they can influence these folks that they may be able to use as problem solvers for the government customer later on? Where do they go to get involved in that?
So I can really only talk to, I'll call it the IT and tech industry. Well, no, there's some robotics clubs in San Antonio, organizations like SA Best that run robotics competitions, which is also very cool. I'm not really associated with it, so I can't speak to it authoritatively. I got involved with Cyber Patriot as a member of the Civil Air Patrol back in 2014. When I first moved to Texas, I joined the Lackland Cadet Squadron, and they had a team, and they had a government civilian who was basically the coach, and he was teaching these 13, 14, 15-year-old kids how to do network defense. And I thought, this is great. And I wasn't even in the cyber industry at that point, so I did a little bit of learning through that. And I wouldn't say I was a great coach. I was learning at the same time as the kids.
He was mentoring you too, and didn't even know it.
He was mentoring me too. And you know, that team ended up, you know, going to city and state and then regional competition, and that's just Civil Air Patrol. There's high schools and middle schools that put out Cyber Patriot teams. If you look at all the cities around the U.S., you'll have like New York and Los Angeles putting out dozens or even 100 teams. San Antonio is like 350 teams.
OMG.
We smoke every other city just by the number of teams that this city sends to competition. And we routinely have high schools that go to DC in every January or February or March for the national level competition and place top 3.
That's awesome.
That's a routine for this city.
That's awesome. And I think it's brilliant that we're doing things that are making it fun and interesting early, so that it becomes more like the sport that somebody always ever played, and it's not necessarily this job you're throwing me into later. I learned to love it as a young person. I got interested in it, and then I found that it just continued to grow. And man, I can go get a career in this.
You can. And this city, as Cyber City and Military USA, they embrace it. The mayor holds what's called the Mayor's Cup every, I think, February, and invites all the teams that competed to a big luncheon. And there's government agencies that are there recruiting those kids.
It's brilliant. And
like, as soon as you graduate, come work for the NSA, come work for 16th Air Force. We need you.
Yeah, and it gives the opportunity not just for them to get a skill or a career, but for them, for all of you who invest, all of you who are subject matter experts on whatever, going and investing in our young people, it allows us to build the future of our workforce. And if you happen to be in GovCon industry that does services, you're building your future workforce that's going to serve the government.
We are. And that's why companies like yours and mine, we support organizations like AFCEA because they in turn donate and support things like Cyber Patriot. And two, you mentioned workforce development. Some of these kids, we don't want them going to New York or San Francisco. We want them staying in San Antonio and working here after they graduate.
Yeah.
So improving their post high school, post college options here. Their nightlife, affordable housing. We need them. We need to keep all that in mind as we ask them to stay here. They can't stay here just for a job.
Yeah.
They have to have a quality of life.
It's fair. It's fair.
Yeah.
Tech's a great place to be.
It is.
Yeah. So, okay, we're running toward the end here because, we got to wrap it up. And so what I would like is for you to just give us what is your unsolicited advice for anyone in industry who wants to genuinely support the work the government teams are trying to accomplish and not just sell to the government. What's your unsolicited advice?
That would be find out what you love. Find out what you're good at and what your passion is. What's the term? Is it ikigai? There's what you're good at, what you'll get paid for, and what you love. And hopefully, like in a Venn diagram sense, you can land somewhere in the middle of all those three circles. Try to find out what that is, but don't be afraid to try multiple things. Don't pigeonhole yourself into, I learned help desk, I'm going to work help desk forever, and this is all I can do, and this is all I'm capable of. That is not true. If I would have believed that, I'd still be climbing trees and raking leaves.
Oh, I love
it. Just know that you're capable of so much more than you think you might be. And if you're hanging out with people that tell you, no, you can't do that, cut those people out and come find supportive, encouraging people, find mentors that are working in the area that you're interested in, because they'll tell you right away what they'll love and what you won't love about the job. That's a great thing about, AFCEA is you'll find mentors who genuinely care and won't give you bad advice.
No, I love that. I when I was leaving the military, trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up, right? Because who are you when you're out of uniform? I had an opportunity, and I took it, to do a lot of those informational interviews to see what were people doing that weren't in the military, and did they actually like it?
Yeah.
Because, you could do a thing and you could find that it pays the bills and you're in a good place, but do you love it? And when you only have so many days in your life to live, what are you doing with them? Yeah.
And from a GovCon perspective, the Department of War and government, the FedCiv, they need so much support and assistance in so many areas. There's no shortage of work there.
No, and you could be raking leaves and cutting tree limbs for the government too if you wanted to. I mean, seriously, it doesn't matter what you do.
That is not a lie.
There may have been a day or two I considered, that'd be really relaxing right now.
The person that runs the tractor at the golf course.
Yeah, I don't want to answer this 50-page RFI. I'd rather just drive a tractor.
Okay, well, I think it's great. This has been such a pleasure. Thank you, Shawn. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. If you want to know more about Semper Valens, you can find them at sempervalens.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more of our conversations about government contracting, government operations, industry, all the things that people want to talk about when they're looking at working and then bridging the gap between working and what the government needs and what we can do for them. That's what I'm trying to say. If I could get all the words out, that'd be great. But we'll see you next time here on Unsolicited.